When it comes to AI, most enterprises think they can just stitch things together. They take best of the breed AI infrastructure on their own. And yes, they can do that, but then they also kind of open a can of worms. They will drown in integration complexity, vendor fragmentation, and architecture decision that they are kind of stuck with. What we need is composable, pre-integrated AI stack as they are becoming table stakes, and that's exactly what Mirantis is building. They're building an ecosystem that makes this possible at scale, leveraging decades of their open source experience to give enterprises real choice and flexibility. And to talk about that, today we have with us Richard Borenstein, Senior Vice President of Growth and Business Development at Mirantis. Richard, it's great to have you here on the show.
Nice to see you, Swapnil. Thank you for having this conversation.
It's my pleasure. Let's start with you. You have spent your career in open source infrastructure all the way from OpenStack days, and now you're leading growth at Mirantis. When we look at the whole AI, talk a bit about the infrastructure part of AI, because we get so much caught up with all the models and LLMs. We don't talk about infrastructure, but when it comes to enterprise, that is what is critical to start building out their AI infrastructure.
It's absolutely right. I mean, it really is an order of magnitude larger in terms of complexity. And thankfully, we're in a position to help those businesses given our deep experience at managing infrastructure at scale. But the reality, Swapnil, is that there are so many moving parts. There's so many pieces that need to be put together. So the compute landscape alone is incredibly complex, right? From the NVIDIA piece to custom silicon to next-gen accelerators, you have to make this all work together. The networking layer, the storage layer, the orchestration layer, and each is evolving and independently and rapidly, right? So trying to do it on your own is a tall task. And often the decisions that you make can lock you or your customers kind of into a bet on a single vendor. And that's very limiting. And so you may be also incurring an integration tax that compounds every quarter because of this inflexibility. And that's what's so, I think, compelling about the work that we're doing is that we've made a deliberate choice to build an ecosystem first, right? Our partnership with NVIDIA, it's not just a logo relationship, it's structural, right? Cordant is built around NVIDIA's Carbide framework, which means our customers are getting the benefit of all of that technology built into our knowledge base. And that is a very important piece of how we can help manage the complexities on behalf of companies so they can get back and do what they do best, right? We have a very meaningful and deep relationship that will allow the ecosystem to benefit from this experience. And the companies that win in AR infrastructure will be the ones that become the connective tissue between the best components, not the ones trying to own every layer. So that's something else that we are very proud of being able to do, is to help become that connective tissue. And something I like to say often is act as the bridge between your current infrastructure and your AI-ready infrastructure.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I am also kind of curious, when enterprises, they start, of course, choosing AI, their first instinct is to just, as I said, put everything together, hardware, software, services on their own. In your experience, and of course, the work you've done with your customers, at what point does that start to break down? And what led Mirantis to focus on building this strong ecosystem around AI infrastructure?
It really speaks to kind of the pedigree of Mirantis, if you will, in terms of being very open source minded. And the OpenStack was one of the most ambitious infrastructure bets of the last decade, right? And it taught us something. It taught us that something that's playing out in AI now, which was that enterprises will not permanently accept being held hostage by proprietary stacks. And the underlying technology is commoditized. So OpenStack succeeded in breaking the VMware lock-in narrative for cloud. Kubernetes did it again for containers. And now the same dynamic is happening in infrastructure. So our OpenStack heritage gives us credibility and kind of like the scar tissue that you can't fake. We know how to operationalize complex distributed infrastructure at enterprise scale. We know how to build communities of operators who trust the platform. And critically, we know how to maintain enterprise-grade supportability around open source cores, which is exactly what enterprises need when they're evaluating whether to trust open infrastructure for production AI workloads. And when enterprises look at Cordant AI, which is our platform, they're not getting a startup's first product. They're getting the distilled operational knowledge of teams who've run some of the world's most demanding infrastructure environments. So we help kind of the shortcut, Swapnil, if you will, of not having to force the companies to piece this together, to learn the technologies. And many of these environments, if not the vast majority, the resources aren't there either. They don't have the internal knowledge base to be able to do this independently. It's only really a handful of the major players that can do that. But what about everybody else?
When it comes to resource, there are two kind of course, hardware is also hard to find. It's very expensive. And also things are changing so rapidly, so fast. Every week, something new comes out. And the skill gap is also there. Now, I also want to talk a bit about Mirantis, as well as you folks, the whole open source, OpenStack background. How does that background change the way you think about AI infrastructure, especially now where so many enterprises have started to look at alternative, and there are a lot of open source technologies are there. Actually, I almost every interview I do, no matter who I talk to, it's all about AI and open weight models. Even I run them all locally. They are getting as good as other models. Sometimes you really don't need big models. Small models actually perform much better, and that's where OpenClaw is. Of course, there DeepSeek is there. So much open source. PyTorch is the foundation of everything that is being done there. You folks are doing a lot of work in this way. Talk a bit about how are enterprises looking at alternatives, which gives them much more control, much more flexibility. And of course, when we talk about the whole new cloud, when we talk about the AI sovereignty, that piece starts to play much bigger picture than the whole integrated proprietary stack.
Yeah, I think to start with the first part of your question, it really is the benefit of our experience that allows us to have an informed opinion and have really migrated our capability set and our knowledge into this very robust platform and capability set. And that came from, earning a reputation by helping enterprises run OpenStack at scale, and particularly in industries with complex and performance-intensive infrastructure demand. So we were early adopters of cloud-native technologies. Expanded from OpenStack into Kubernetes, then container orchestration, developer platforms, full lifecycle management. And throughout that evolution, we've remained committed to openness, like operational control, customer choice of technology. And basically, we've extended all of that now to meet the emerging requirements around AI infrastructure with a very key focus on digital sovereignty and modern virtualization. And I think the second part of your question is what companies are aspiring to do is really the dialogue we like to have. We're trying to discuss outcomes with our customers and obviate them from the deep technological education that's required on a daily basis to maintain all of this, not only for the build, the day zero, but the day one and the day two and the day three, operationalizing, optimizing, iterating, and evaluating key components on an ongoing basis. And that's where we built our control plane in Cordant AI to be able to do all of these things simultaneously, as well as being able to extend and manage existing infrastructure like OpenStack and Kubernetes clusters. As you rise to the moment of AI, you need to be able to manage those both effectively. And this is what some of our largest companies come to us for, is that expertise. And the challenges they face are meaningful, right? You're talking about, we manage the majority of the Fortune 1000, some of the biggest companies in the world. And how do they figure out what to do? Well, there's the do it yourself. And as I said, some people are able to do that. But we want customers to not have to worry about those pieces of the puzzle. We're going to help walk them through the full life cycle, as we've done previously, from design and architecture to deployment to operations. And with our track record, we've got the credibility and the bona fides to do that, so that we can talk about what you said rightly, is how they're going to use models at the top end, which models and where. And then we've also built into the platform the ability to do the inference routing so you can make sure about sovereignty and GDPR and security. And, we are kind of the pioneers in that private cloud evolution. So this has given us a very informed capability and this ability to help guide companies to achieve those outcomes through the means of our interactions.
Yeah, I mean, nobody can match the scale that OpenStack. I mean, we used to cover that, and thousands of cores CERN is running, and square array telescopes, and so much was going on. And that was a interesting phase. Now, you talked about kind of build it yourself by when you look at what enterprises, there is also a difference between what enterprises actually need versus what they want versus what they see everyone else is doing, so they get confused. What are the gaps between what they want to build themselves versus what they're actually capable of building without getting totally bogged down? And in this discussion, we have been emphasizing a lot of on pre-integrated solutions and professional services also, and which is also part of Mirantis service to, I think, maintain a balance between giving them the flexibility of using a lot of open source things, but also not worrying about it. Talk a bit about why can't customers just leverage open source tooling and wire it all together? Of course, the complexity comes in. I just want to understand what they can do, but they should not do, and how Mirantis comes to actually help them, because they should focus more on taking advantage on these technologies. There is no business benefit to get stuck with plumbing.
Yeah, the way we look at it, Swapnil, is we are open but opinionated. We have great flexibility, but we have deep experience and some very strong opinions on how you do it. But we want the customer to first and foremost have the flexibility to achieve what they want to do. Now, in order to figure out how we can best map to them, we do pretty intensive assessments, because we're not really just selling software or a platform. We're really building a long-term partnership. And often it's design partnership all the way through to production. And specifically to your question, the AI infrastructure do-it-yourself tax is enormous. And most enterprises are still underestimating it. Assembling a production-grade AI stack means making dozens of interdependent decisions. Which GPU operator, which network fabric, which storage tier, how you handle multi-tenancy, how you expose the environment to data science teams, how you handle day two operations. Each of these is like a 6-month project in and of itself. And companies that try to build it from scratch are committing their best engineers to kind of the guts and the plumbing rather than differentiation. So what we see with Coordinate AI is that pre-integration isn't just about convenience. It's about de-risking the whole process. When a customer deploys our stack, the NVIDIA components are certified, the integrations are tested, and our professional service teams have battle-hardened playbooks from real deployments. So the alternative, assembling it yourself, means you own every integration failure, every version conflict, every 3 a.m. incident that's nobody's problem but yours. The real risk isn't the licensing cost or even the time to build. It's that by the time you finish building, the technology has moved on and you're maintaining a deprecated architecture. Pre-integrated platforms let organizations stay current without rebuilding from scratch every 18 months. That's what you're investing in by working with us.
There's one more concern, which is vendor lock-in. That anxiety is there, especially in the AI infrastructure space. How does a composable architecture actually protect enterprises from making decisions that won't harm them years from now? It will totally eliminate the whole tribal knowledge and the whole technical debt they will incur otherwise.
Yeah, I think that is palpable fear that companies have, is that they will get locked into that scenario again where they're beholden to a single monolithic architecture that doesn't evolve at their pace, that doesn't respond to their needs. There was a time for that. That time has passed. Now what companies prioritize is composability and long-term flexibility. You have to build in iterations, change, adds, and deletes into your capability set. So composability is the architectural answer to a landscape in permanent beta. Nobody knows what the dominant AI hardware looks like in 5 years. The model layer is changing faster than any infrastructure team can track. networking architectures for AI, like InfiniBand or Rocky or NVLink fabrics, are all evolving simultaneously. If your infrastructure strategy requires ripping and replacing every time one of these layers shifts, you're going to be in a constant state of disruption. So that's what we solved for. We made Cordant AI the ability to build on a composable declarative architecture, which means organizations can swap components without rebuilding the entire stack. You can adopt a new accelerator, plug in a different storage backend, integrate emerging tooling without starting over. That's not an accident. It's a design principle we've held since our Kubernetes native foundation. And it matters enormously for enterprises that have real compliance, security, and operational continuity requirements. They can't afford to treat infrastructure as disposable. Composability is how you give organizations the freedom to evolve without the cost of chaos. It's why we call Cordant AI the OS for AI infrastructure. An OS doesn't lock you into applications, it enables them.
No, once again, so what it well said. Thank you. I'm also kind of curious looking at your and Mirantis's background roots in OpenStack because the scale at which OpenStack deals with, nobody can match. Have you seen any patterns, lessons from that era that you're bringing into how you folks are building infrastructure for AI today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if this will surprise you a little bit in terms of the answer, but it's not just the fact that we've built the most capable and robust AI platform for the modern era. It's that we have the human equity that we apply against it as well. So our professional services and managed services is what we learned. These companies need help and they need handholding at times, and they need to be able to have their people trained and certified and have the ability to support these engagements with that human capital. And so that's a big takeaway for us. It's something we've been doing really well for, as I mentioned, the Fortune 1000 companies that we've been so proud to work with for decades plus, is that we become partners with them, not just at the technology level, but we support them at the human level. And that allows them to do things like call us in when they need help, or even use our managed services that actually run their platforms and manage the day-to-day for them. So that's a really big one. It's the combination of that kind of service and support with the platform itself. The other is just the nature of evolution as being something you have to factor in, as I was mentioning earlier. This needs to be able to change on a daily basis if required. And if you don't have the tooling to do that, then you will be stuck in long development cycles, beholden to a multitude of vendors. Whereas we have aspired to and are proving that we can help companies achieve their corporate goals and their revenue goals by finding the right partner to be able to manage that complexity for them. And it's not just a local equation. The companies we deal with are global in nature, and they have outposts, and they're beholden to certain sovereignty and security and financial requirements that are different across geographies. And so to be able to build that into your capability set is also something we've worked hard to do so that we could be that answer on a global basis for the world's leading companies.
We have been talking about, of course, doing it yourself leads to complexity, all those challenges. But can you talk about what are some of the risks that enterprises may be running into when they do try to tackle it themselves, when they do try to solve the AI infrastructure complexity themselves without taking support from the whole ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of three buckets, if you will, in my mind. It's like the tech stack complexity is meaningful, and it's really intense and intricate. And building a cloud requires, first and foremost, proper tenant isolation and fault tolerance. That's a challenge in and of itself. I think with small teams working on multiple projects, it's hard to achieve even that. But addressing multi-tenancy requirements is also vital. And that means we can bring to the table, and where some companies are challenged in terms of expertise for virtualization and GPU configuration and partitioning, high performance networking, storage. Like, the reality is that buying the hardware is the easy part. Operationalizing it is the harder part. And as we were saying earlier, like, most teams just don't have that experience today. And that's where we can come in, because ultimately what they're hoping for is like a hyperscaler-like experience. That's what the companies are aspiring to, and a seamless, low latency, high performance environment with the basics of a cloud console and APIs and software and value-added services and accurate metering and billing, and of course, security and proper multi-tenancy. It's difficult to do all of that. And those are real challenges for our customers. And then lastly, operational efficiency. Like, they need to be able to build and operate this type of environment with a relatively small team, or else the math doesn't work. Maximize the return on investment by driving the highest possible utilization. A lot of these instances are not being utilized to their full potential. We're seeing 15, 20% usage, and we're helping companies to optimize and utilize through bin packing and workload placement and multi-tenancy that I mentioned. And they want to have a degree of optionality and configurability to afford differentiated services without much effort. So these are the things that the problems we've identified and what we've tried to solve for them. Those challenges sound like the right ones that, for companies that you were thinking about, Swapnil?
Thank you so much. No, you're absolutely right there. One more thing I want to ask is that, let's say you are at an event, you walk and met an enterprise team, because it's as much about technology, of course, culture part we have been talking about a lot, but I also feel that when it comes to AI, you also need a mindset shift as well. If you're advising an enterprise team that wants to build AI infrastructure this year, what is one mindset shift they need to make first? Stop thinking in terms of products, stop thinking in terms of the next shiny object, and start thinking in terms of ecosystem. What would that be?
I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I'll expand on it, which is they need to and are starting to think about the top end of the stack, how they're going to empower AI to serve their corporate goals. And that's where we come in, is that Coordinate AI provides that turnkey GPU cloud, kind of cloud in a box that already has integrated the infrastructure automation and the Kubernetes and service provisioning and customer-facing cloud services into that single platform. So we really anticipate and are seeing them understanding that with the right partner, they can actually focus on their core business. They don't have to carry that burden. It gives both operators and end customers that hyperscaler-like cloud experience, fully packaged, automated, kind of ready to monetize. And they also want to get that customer-facing experience right. So that customer service portal that delivers a full service cloud interface, service ordering, team management, billing, inventory, like these are the things that they need to have in order to be successful. And so we bring that customer-facing mentality and capability to bear as well. And it offers enormous value because they can already have all of this pre-assembled that makes the internal experience much easier, the external customer-facing experience much more valuable. And overall, the platform just delivers kind of that clear separation of concerns. We can build and run the hard part, and you can focus on your business so your customers can consume it. And I think that's the shift. We've gone through this phase of, I'm going to build it myself, I'm going to package it together, as we've seen in previous technology cycles before, right? So I'm not like, at first you're like, I'm going to own this. And then you realize there is really no way for me to focus on my business if I'm actually doing the nitty gritty and trying to piece this together, not only for day one, but for the long term.
And open source actually make it more tempting that you feel like, yeah, we can just put it all together. Day zero, day one is the easy part. You can install everything, you can download everything, but then you have to deal with all the patches, you have to deal with security, you have to suddenly deal with functionality and the scalability, and that's where you get stuck, and then suddenly your project fails. This may be a bit off topic, but I do want to talk a bit about, because you folks are in the infrastructure space. There are a lot of challenges these days. Of course, hardware is a big challenge. Availability of hardware, cost is a big challenge. Now, AWS, everybody's kind of working on building their own chips as well. NVIDIA is entering the software space as well. Where do you see hardware vendors and software platforms converge or diverge as AI infrastructure evolve, where do you see Mirantis in that world?
Yeah, so that is really kind of the model that I envision being accelerated in the near term, and we're starting to see this this bundle kind of approach, which is you can't look at these pieces in isolation. You have to understand how your hardware works with your GPU, works with your operations infrastructure, and I mean, you may have seen Jensen's 5-layer cake. You have to actually keep that in mind and think about how you build using that. And what that does is it really gives you some kind of clarity of mission, if you will, to a certain extent. You want to package together the solutions that make the most sense for your organization. And the hardware vendors realize that they need these additional layers and capabilities to ensure that their customers maximize utilization and satisfaction with their products. So that's why we work together with Dell, with Supermicro, to ensure that when we get in front of the customer, we have a very simple story, which is this is, as I mentioned with our NVIDIA relationship, pre-validated. We have the reference architectures. It's tested, accredited, and ready to go. And so the more that the hardware vendors can do that, the more they'll make it easily digestible for their companies to not only use what they've bought, but to have the level of satisfaction and confidence to go out and continue purchasing at scale. So it's an important part of their growth. And that's where we come in, is we are that AIOS that ensures that you can set it up, optimize, maximize, and build for the long term. And we don't need to boil the ocean on day one, Swapnil. Like we go in there, we're happy to start with small amounts of infrastructure to get you up and running. But the truth is, the companies that we work for are literally some of the biggest in the world that require enormous estates of technology. And the more simplified we can create that reality for them, the greater benefit we create and the better use case that we expose.
Richard, thank you so much for joining us and breaking down why ecosystem thinking matters so much versus thinking all about yourself, building things about yourself. Yes, you can do that, but it won't work in the long term. Thank you so much for all those great insights, and I look forward to chat with you folks again. Thank you.
I look forward to. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I hope to see you soon.